After studying this module, you would know the concept of foreign direct investment or FDI. You would know some of the related definitions. You would also know about the history of the theory of FDI. Then you would understand the theoretical background and developments in theory, and then we will go on to understand some of the theories of FDI. Foreign direct investment is a controlling ownership in the business enterprise in a host country by an entity based in the home country. Now, to remember and understand, let us treat host country as a developing economy and home country as a developed economy. Foreign direct investment must be distinguished from foreign portfolio investment. This is done through investment in securities of another country such as shares and debentures, bonds and so on, for attaining a minimal amount of control. That is, foreign portfolio investment is not really directed at having a control and management of the concerned company or firm, nor is there a long term interest on the part of the investors. They are basically into investing in shares and other instruments only for gaining short term capital gains. According to Financial Times, the standard definition of control use is the internationally agreed 10% threshold of voting shares, but this is a grey area and often there could be smaller blocks of shares which will give control in a widely held company. Moreover, the control of technology, management and even crucial inputs can confer a de facto control. However, let us stick to the notion that FDI is about control, management and long term interest in the company, whereas FII or foreign portfolio investment is only for very short term capital gains. The origin of the investment does not impact the definition of FDI. The investment may be made either inorganically by buying a company in the target country or by organically expanding the operations of an existing business in that country. Let us consider certain definitions. Broadly, FDI includes mergers, acquisition, buying of new facilities, reinvestment of profits earned from overseas operations and intra-company loans. In a narrow sense, FDI refers just to the building of new facilities or the building up of new capital stock. The numerical FDI figures based on varied definitions are not really easily comparable. So, these are some of the definitional problems. The conceptual side, on the conceptual side, a part of the national income accounting takes into account the implications of foreign direct investment. As we know, the GDP is given by Y is equal to C plus I plus G plus exports, value of exports minus imports. So, therefore, when we include net foreign income, then it refers to GNP. But apart from this, we have gross investment and government spending, that is gross investment, we must note over here, includes the investments which come in the form of domestic investments or in the form of foreign investments, and these investments FDI is defined as a net inflow of investments, that is inflow minus outflow, and it is intended, as we have said, for to acquire a lasting management interest 10% or more of the voting stock in an enterprise operating in an economy other than that of the investor. FDI is the sum of the equity capital, other long term capital, short term capital, all of which are shown as a part of the balance of payment. FDI usually involves participation in management, joint ventures, transfer of technology and expertise. FDI is also measured as a stock. Stock of FDI is measured as the net, that is the inward FDI minus the outward FDI, which accumulates in the certain period in the form of FDI and the accumulation of foreign capital in the form of capital stock in the host country. The foreign direct investment is a controlling interest in the ownership of a business enterprise. Foreign direct investment is distinguished, as we have said, from portfolio investment, which is a passive investment, and this we have just considered that these are the basic definitional aspects of FDI. Now, let us look at the history of the theory of FDI. Stephen Heimer is considered to be the father of international business theory, or foreign direct FDI theory, or multinational corporation theory, multinational enterprise theory, M&E theory, due to his contributions in the area and his studies, and who has actually produced many such works which are relevant in the field of FDI theory. Today, they are collectively known as the theories of FDI or the theories of multinational corporations or multinational enterprises. Heimer's main contributions, which predate most of today's existing theories on the subject of FDI and multinational corporations, are collected in 11 documents, including his 1960 doctoral thesis. Before his theory of FDI, all investments were considered to be mere capital movements across borders. These movements of capital were thought to be determined mainly by the differences in the interest rates between countries. Heimer established that there was a distinction between financial investments, which he named foreign direct investments. The latter gave the firm control over the business activities in other countries, whereas portfolio investment does not do this. The theory presented by Heimer, Stephen Heimer, is considered to be a departure from the neoclassical perspective and the considerations of a perfect market structure. Heimer's main conclusion is that foreign direct investment can only succeed as long as the market imperfections that create advantages are responsible for creating such opportunities, and also there is a role of conflicts. Companies could reduce their competition by implementing foreign direct investment. In this way, the companies can eliminate the conflicts arising in the market and benefit from the specific firm specific advantage or FSA. Heimer considered multinational firms to be better institutions than the actual international markets in the process of stimulating business and for information transformation as well as for price fixing. That means the multinational corporations were considered to be more efficient than the market, because these are all the functions that the market performs, and this was mentioned by Dunning and Pitelis in the academic paper. uh, Stephen's, Stephenheimer's contribution to international business scholarship and assessment and extension. In the analysis of the nature and causes of foreign investment, Heimer made a distinction between direct investment and portfolio investment. After ascertaining the differences in interest rates cause portfolio investments, and that the industrial distribution of the latter is not significantly different from one country to the other, as could be expected, the cause was solely differences in profitability. Heimer concludes that direct investments are capital movements associated to international operations of firms. Their goal is to keep control on production. The control allows either to suppress competition or to appropriate rents derived from advantages like skilled labor, cheap raw material, access to capital, access to markets and technology. Later, Heimer in fact used some Marxian language and concepts more explicitly. In a series of articles published in 1970s, he considered the relationship between nation states and multinational firms, detailing their role in the creation of international division of labor. Heimer argued that this hierarchical division of labor was a macrocosm of the international division of labor reproduced within the multinational corporations. Heimer did not believe that these firms had become more powerful than the nation states, whereas some of the Marxist writing did believe this. Instead, multinationals were firmly rooted in the major financial centers in the world, and they tended to reinforce the existing geographic and spatial boundaries and dependencies. Papers and articles on this and various other topics were compiled by Heimer's graduate students from the New School for Social Research in the radical approach to multinational corporations, and these were published by Cambridge University Press in 1979. Heimer's theories have strongly influenced other economists such as Cantwell, Dunning, and were elaborated by Heimer's dissertation advisor C.P. Kindleberger in American Business Abroad, a series of lectures published in 1969. The latter played an important role in the posthumous publication of Heimer's dissertation. Many authors have used Heimer's theories to develop new theoretical approaches in the field of international business. One of these theories is known as the OLI theory or the OLI paradigm: ownership, location and internalization. Also known as the eclectic paradigm, developed by John Dunning in 1977, which has adopted Heimer's firm specific advantage. Now let us look at the theoretical background. Gracia-Letos-Gillies in 2012, prior to Heimer's theory regarding direct investments in the 60s, the reasons behind FDI and multinationals was explained by neoclassical economics and were based on macroeconomic principles. These theories were based on the classical theory of trade, which was a result of the differences in cost of production between the different countries and focusing on low cost production as a motive for a firm's foreign activity. J.S. Baines explained that internationalization challenge through three main principles: absolute cost advantage, product differentiation and economies of scale. Furthermore, the neoclassical theories were created under the assumption of the existence of perfect competition. Intrigued by the motivations behind large foreign investments made by corporations from United States, Heimer developed a framework that went beyond the existing theories explaining why this phenomenon occurred. Since he considered the previous theories could not actually explain what was happening in the latter years and the latter decades in terms of the FDI investments and the motivation for doing such investments abroad. Facing the challenge of the predecessors, Heimer focused his theory on filling the gaps regarding international investments. The theory proposed by the author approaches international investment from a different point of view, from a firm specific point of view, as opposed to the traditional macroeconomic based theories of investment. Heimer stated that there is a difference between capital investment, otherwise known as portfolio investment, and that is the difference between FPI and FDI. The difference between the two, which will become the cornerstone of his whole theoretical framework, is the issue of control, meaning that the direct investment firms are able to obtain a greater level of control than the portfolio investment. Furthermore, Heimer proceeds to criticize the neoclassical theory, stating that the theory of capital movements cannot explain international production. Moreover, he clarifies that FDI is not necessarily a movement of funds from home country to the host country, and that is concentrated on a particular industry within many countries. In contrast, if interest rates were the main motive for international investment, FDI would include many industries within few countries. Another interesting observation made by Heimer went against what was maintained by the neoclassical theory. FDI is not limited to investment of excess profits abroad. In fact, FDI investment can be financed through loans obtained in the host country, payments in exchange for equity, patents, technology, machinery, etc., and other methods. The previous criticism, along with assuming market imperfections, led Heimer to propose the three main determinants of foreign direct investment. One is firm specific advantages, FSA. Once domestic investment was exhausted, the firm could exploit its advantage linked to market imperfections, which could provide the firm with market power and competitive advantage. Further studies attempted to explain how firms could monetize these advantages in the form of licenses. Removal of conflicts. Conflicts arise if a firm already operating in a foreign market or is looking to expand its operation within the same market, and under such circumstances he proposes that the solution for this hurdle arose in the form of collusion, sharing the market with rivals or attempting to acquire direct control of production. However, it must be taken into account that reduction in conflicts through acquisition of control of operations will increase the market imperfections. Thirdly, propensity to formulate internalization strategy to mitigate risk. According to his position, firms are characterized with three levels of decision making: the day-to-day supervision, management decision, coordination, and long-term plans and strategies in the process of decision making. The extent to which a company can mitigate the risk depends upon how well a firm can formulate its internationalization strategy, taking these levels of decisions into account. Heimer's importance in the field of FDI stems from his being the first to theorize about the existence of a multinational enterprise, and for the reasons behind foreign direct investment beyond macroeconomic principles. His influence on later scholars and theories of international business such as OLI, as has been mentioned by John Dunning and Christos Pitelis, which focused more on transaction cost. Moreover, the efficiency value creation component of FDI and M&E activity was further strengthened by two major scholars developments with the in the 1990s the resource based and the evolutionary theories. Dunning and Patelis in 2008 in addition came up with some predictions that later materialized. For example, the power of supranational bodies such as IMF and the World Bank increases inequalities. So, these are some of the imprints of some of the great scholars who are responsible for developing FDI theory. Stop. Let us now consider the different types of FDI. Horizontal FDI. Horizontal FDI arises when the firm duplicates its home country activities in the same value chain stage in a host country through FDI. Platform FDI. FDI from a source country into a destination country for the purpose of exporting to a third country. This is also known as export platforms. Vertical FDI takes place when the firm through FDI moves upstream or downstream in different value chains, when the firm performs value adding activities stage by stage in a vertical fashion in a host country. Let us now study the eclectic paradigm. It has been mentioned that the further development after Heimer, the major development in theory of FDI was the OLI model. The OLI model has been given to us by John Dunning in 1979. The internalization theory itself was based on the transaction cost theory. This theory says that transactions are made within an institution if the transaction cost of the free market are higher than the internal costs. This process is called internalization. So, in the OLI we have one element called I. The other elements are ownership advantage. The ownership advantage implies that multinational corporations have advantages like trademarks, production techniques, entrepreneurial skills, returns to scale, management skills and so on. So, the ownership specific advantages refer to the competitive advantages of the enterprise to engage in foreign direct investments. The greater the competitive advantages of the investing firm, the more they are likely to engage in foreign production. Locational advantages. Locational advantages are the existence of raw materials or lower wages, lower tariffs or some kind of subsidies and so on. The locational attraction refers to the alternative countries of the regions for undertaking the value adding activities of multinational enterprises. The more the immobile or natural or created resources which the firm needs to jointly use with their own competitive advantages favors the presence of a foreign location, and the more firms will choose to augment or exploit this by the O specific advantage by engaging in FDI. Internalization is something which we have already argued by advantage of production rather than by production through a partnership arrangement or a licensing arrangement. The firm may organize the creation and exploitation of core competencies. The greater the net benefits of internalizing across borders the intermediate products, it makes the firm more capable of investing and producing abroad, and such firms would engage in foreign production themselves rather than license it to others to do. Let us now summarize what we have studied in this module about foreign direct investment theories or multinational enterprise theory. It is also known as international business theory. First of all, we have studied the concept of foreign direct investment. We have then gone on to study some of the definitions. We have studied the difference between foreign portfolio investment and foreign direct investment. Then there was an elaborate discussion about the history of the theory of multinational enterprise. The main architect of the theory of multinational enterprise was Stephenheimer, who was a PhD student of C.P. Kindleberger, and later the contributions of Stephenheimer, which went beyond the existing neoclassical theory, was responsible for setting up the theory of internalization. The theory of internalization says that the multinational corporations have got specific firm specific advantages by which they can produce at a lower cost than the market. The transaction costs that the market incurs, that the firms incur through the market, are more than the transaction costs which they would incur if the production is done internally. This was the fundamental basis of the new theory of FDI or the theory of multinational enterprise. It was further strengthened by John Dunning by extending two more dimensions, and this theory is known as the OLI theory. So we have the internalization, the location, and the organizational advantages. So therefore, this theory, John Dunning's theory, is the recent development, and there are further versions of John Dunning's theory, but basically it is this eclectic paradigm along with certain monopolistic advantage theory which also exists in the background.